of cities now had little else to do all day than to fuss and preen over their beloved church, and woe indeed to anyone who got in their way. They worried after the building and squawked at parishioners and pecked at the priest's every move. It seemed to Father Lawrence that their life's purpose now was to make him feel as though they were in the midst of slowly stoning him to death, using only popcorn and lost buttons and bits of yarn. 3 times that week he had found himself in the crosshairs of the sisters' ire, and it was only Wednesday. He was safe for now. He rubbed his ever-loosening jowls and cleared his throat. Seeing no one there, except for a family of rabbits that was, en masse, emerging from under the row of box elders, Father Lawrence felt a sudden, inexplicable, and unbridled surge of joy, to which he responded with a quick clench of his fists and a swallowed yes. He nearly bounced. "Are you coming?" Mrs. Sorensen called from inside the sanctuary. Yes, he said with a sputter. "Of course." But he paused anyway. A young buck came clipping down the road. Not uncommon in these parts, but the priest thought it odd that the animal came to a halt right in front of the church, and turned his face upward as though he was regarding the stained-glass window. Can deer see colour? Father Lawrence didn't know. The deer didn't move. It was a young thing. Its antlers were hardly bigger than German pretzels, and its haunches were sleek, muscular, and supple. It blinked its large, damp eyes and flared its nostrils. The priest paused, as though waiting for the buck to say something. "Deer don't speak," he told himself. "You're being ridiculous." 2 hawks fluttered down and perched on the handrail, while Dear God, was that an otter? Father Lawrence shook his head, adjusted the flap of belly hanging uncomfortably over his belt, and slumped inside. The mourners arrived 2 hours later and arranged themselves silently into their pews. It was a thin crowd. There was the required representative from the glass factory, a low-level supervisor. Mr. Sorensen was not important enough, apparently, to warrant a mourner from an upper-level managerial position, and was certainly not grand enough for the owner himself to drive up from Chicago and pay his respects. The priest bristled at this. The man died at work, he thought. Surely. He shook his head and busied himself with the last-minute preparations. The pretty widow walked with cool assurance from station to station, making sure everything was just so. The mourners, the priest noticed, were mostly men. This stood to reason, as most of Mr. Sorensen's co-workers were men as well. Still, he noticed that several of them had removed their wedding rings, or had thought to insert a jaunty handkerchief in their coat pockets, in what could only be described as non-funeral colours, or had applied hair gel or moustache oil or aftershave. The whole church reeked of men on the prowl. Mrs. Sorensen didn't seem to notice, but that was beside the point. The priest folded his arms and gave a hard look at the backs of their heads. Really, he thought. But then the widow walked into a brightly coloured beam of stained-glass sunlight, and he felt his heart lift, and his cheeks flush, and his breathing quicken and thin. There are people, he thought, who are easy to love, and that is that. Mrs. Sorensen had done a beautiful job with the flowers, creating arrangements at each window in perfect dioramic scenes. In the window depicting the story of the child Jesus and the clay birds that he magicked into feathers and wings and flight, for example, her figure of Jesus was composed of corn husk, ivy, and dried rose petals. The clay birds she had made with home-made dough, and had affixed them to warbled bits of wire. The birds bobbed and weaved unsteadily, as though only just learning how to spread their wings, and her rendition of Daniel in the lion's den was so harrowing in its realism, so brutally present, that people had to avert their eyes. She even made a diorama of the day she and her husband met, a man with a broken leg at the bottom of a gully in the middle of a flowery forest, a woman with a broken heart, wandering alone, happening by, and binding his wound.